With Dygald's forces consumed in a wall of flames, Zwalter capitalized on the surge in Perdium's momentum. Amid the chaos, his voice cut through the air, commanding all units to fire their bolts at the fleeing enemy with no mercy. Protected beneath the reinforced inner hides of the Dirascent, the Black Cavalry units surged forward. They rampaged with brutal precision, cutting down any soldier who dared to raise a blade against Perdium. Their advance was unstoppable, fueled by righteous fury and armored resilience. From deep within the battlefield, Ghislain issued the same ruthless command. His voice echoed across the war-torn ground as he declared that not a single Dygald soldier was to be left breathing. His words carried the same lethal resolve that defined his charge. An awe-inspiring phenomenon unfolded as the battlefield was completely engulfed by flames. No one had ever seen such a spectacle. The inferno blocked any attempt at retreat or regrouping. Within its fiery boundaries, Dygald's forces were helpless. They crumbled before the unrelenting assault of the Black Cavalry, who moved with disciplined ferocity and full protection from the intense heat. As the battle raged, Belinda emerged from the haze of war, bringing Kair. His body barely held together, Kair laid as if lifelessly. She called out to her young lord as she approached. Ghislain halted his charge, both to steady his breath and to hear what Belinda had to report. To his surprise, there was no tactical update or urgent warning. Belinda was simply checking on him. Her concern centered entirely on whether Ghislain had been injured. He assured her with calm composure that not even a scratch had touched him. In turn, he inquired about their well-being. Being irreverent even in the thick of battle, Belinda found humor in the carnage. She directed a sarcastic glance at Kair, nudging him with her eyes to respond. Kair, drenched in blood and barely able to sit upright, he raised a trembling thumbs up. It was a modest gesture, signaling that he was still alive, though only just barely. Ghislain looked at him briefly and chuckled. The sharpness in his eyes remained, but his expression softened slightly. The ridiculous resilience of his subordinates brought him a momentary sense of peace. Belinda kept up her sarcastic tone, remarking that had their plan been delayed even a little, the outcome would have been a catastrophe. She remembered how crazy Ghislain's strategy had seemed when he first explained it. He responded with quiet assurance, simply glad that the plan had succeeded. She quickly added that she never wanted to do anything like that again. The expense had been astronomical. The cost of burning through such a vast stockpile of runestones still weighed heavily on her conscience. Nevertheless, she conceded that the strategy had turned the tide of battle. With a half-hearted grin, she suggested Ghislain give some credit to Vanessa for devising the plan. Ghislain didn't dwell on it any longer, as he already planning to do so. Instead, his thoughts shifted. He asked about Gillian, curious why he had not returned. Gillian had been tasked with raising Dygald's main camp, and there had been no indication that he had failed. Logically, Ghislain assumed Gillian had found another target to engage after fulfilling his initial orders. Belinda looked alarmed. She had no answer, but ultimately reached the same conclusion. Ghislain didn't wait for confirmation. Trusting his instincts, he turned his steed sharply, lowered his helmet visor, and rode off toward the gate. Since Kair was with Belinda and no one had eyes on Victor, it was clear who might still be out there. He left Kair in her care without hesitation. Meanwhile, at the gate, Victor charged like a man possessed. His eyes gleamed with lethal intent, unshakable in his resolve. He had vowed to cut down every last foe himself, and in Gillian, he had found a worthy adversary. As he closed in, Victor spun his sword in a broad arc. Still standing tall despite having slain Adon in the rear lines, Gillian braced himself. He raised his axe's long handle just in time to intercept the powerful swing. But Victor was not finished. His footwork turned into a graceful but deadly rotation. He spun again, momentum surging through his entire frame, and brought the sword crashing down once more. The follow-up was flawless, each movement flowing with practice speed. Gillian had no time to retaliate. He could only raise his axe again, absorbing the devastating force that rattled through his limbs. Shock registered in Gillian's eyes. Victor's strength was far greater than he initially expected. Every blow carried the weight of accumulated force, each one striking with increasing pressure. It wasn't merely strength. It was a lethal rhythm. Victor didn't pause. He unleashed a storm of attacks, forcing Gillian into a retreat. Though both were seasoned warriors, Victor's precision was surgical. He moved like a weapon designed for facing swordmasters, forged through countless battles. By contrast, Gillian stood his ground like a weathered lion. His strength came from years of surviving the harsh life of a mercenary. While his steps were slower, each stance radiated determination. His body endured, bruised and beaten, but his spirit remained unbroken, for now. Despite Victor's tactical prowess, the old lion refused to fall easily. In the midst of the clash, Gillian managed a brief moment to rally. With renewed resolve, he unleashed a powerful counterattack, swinging his massive axe from behind as Victor charged into its range. The strike was aimed directly at the neck of the oncoming enemy. However, Victor reacted with inhuman reflexes. Launching himself into the air, he evaded the deadly swing completely. As he soared, his body spun in tandem with his sword, building momentum in perfect harmony between man and blade. Even before touching the ground, Victor had already positioned his blade for a decisive upward slash. His eyes burned with lethal intent, betraying no hesitation or fear. Upon landing, the swing came with deadly force. Battered but vigilant, Gillian managed to twist his body just enough. The blade grazed his shoulder, sending blood splattering and knocking off the iron guard strapped to his arm. A pained hum escaped Gillian's throat, a guttural sound of both agony and grit. Deep within, he assessed Victor's capabilities. His opponent, the Desmond County Hidden Sword, possessed absurd strength and speed, leaving no opportunities to exploit. Victor gave him no respite. Another charge followed immediately, forcing Gillian into a defensive stance. At their level of mastery, a single misstep could result in instant death. The margin for error was non-existent. With unrelenting fury, Victor unleashed a barrage of strikes. His reputation as a field commander may have crumbled, but on the battlefield as a high-level knight, he proved unmatched. Each step forward from Victor pushed Gillian 2 steps back, forcing the mercenary to brace and defend. Inwardly, Victor recognized the resistance. For a while, he had toyed with Gillian, but the old lion's resilience began to irritate him. Furious that Gillian had dared to push back so valiantly, Victor let loose a mental barrage of contempt, branding his foe a filthy mercenary rat. But Gillian cared little for insults. He had already swung his axe with practiced determination. Their weapons met again, Victor's sword rising to deflect the crashing force of Gillian's axe. He utilized the notch in the weapon to channel the energy and twist its path. With skilled precision, Victor hooked the axe with his blade, manipulating the leverage to his advantage. Gillian instantly knew something was wrong. His grip weakened. The axe spun in the air, torn from his hands with stunning mastery. A loud crash echoed as the weapon landed far from reach. Behind them, the wall of fire still raged, casting violent shadows over their duel. Victor saw an opening and seized it. Now that Gillian stood disarmed, he raised his blade once more for the final strike. Derision filled his thoughts as he prepared to kill a man he viewed as lowly and unworthy of facing him. Yet Gillian's eyes remained sharp. He scanned every movement, calculating Victor's intent, searching for a thread of survival. Then came the thrust. Victor drove his sword straight into Gillian's abdomen. Blood sprayed as the blade exited through his back. But Gillian had not frozen. His vast combat experience had warned him just in time. Though unable to dodge completely, he twisted slightly, guiding the sword away from vital organs. The pain was intense, and a mouthful of blood erupted from his lips, but he lived. Victor noticed it as well. Gillian's movement had blunted what should have been a fatal strike. Now, the mercenary clung to the embedded blade, gripping it with everything he had. For the first time, Victor reevaluated. He understood then that Gillian's defeat of Adon had not been mere luck. Adon had been formidable, yet this man endured both that battle and the current one. It was reckless, perhaps even foolish, but it earned Victor's respect. In his final assessment, Victor acknowledged that Adon, of all people, would not have regretted falling to someone like Gillian. With the decision made, Victor chose not to retract the blade, but to drive it deeper. He poured mana into the sword, intending to end the fight definitively. The command in his mind was absolute. He would make the old lion die here and now. But before the act could be completed, his instincts screamed in warning. Something was hurtling toward him with overwhelming force. A sword, imbued with a dense concentration of mana, tore through the air. Its trajectory was precise. It was aimed straight at Victor's head. Victor immediately abandoned his intention to finish off Gillian. Instead, he gathered every ounce of physical strength, kicked Gillian away from him, and propelled himself backward, tearing his sword free from Gillian's desperate grip in the same motion. As his feet touched solid ground, Victor's head jerked toward the direction the sudden attack had come from. His thoughts raced. The very notion that someone within Perdium's ranks possessed the power of a high-level knight felt utterly impossible, completely outside any intelligence he had received. Measured and unwavering, Ghislain advanced across the battlefield, heading toward the two warriors locked in their fading duel. Gillian now lay sprawled across the ground, drained of all strength, unable to mount any further resistance. Ghislain's arrival had, in that instant, spared the old mercenary from certain death. Victor drew in a sharp breath, shocked beyond words. He could not, for the life of him, identify the man who approached. This figure, commanding, armored, and confident, had never once appeared in the countless reports passed down from spies embedded within Perdium's forces. On the other hand, Gillian exhaled in relief. Recognition settled over him as he saw the young master arrive to confront the hidden sword of Desmond County directly. As Ghislain closed the distance, he stooped to pick up the massive long-handled axe that once belonged to Gillian. He twirled it playfully in his grasp, then let its weight rest naturally on his shoulder. Each step he took radiated authority. His breathing remained calm, his eyes unwavering. The wall of flames behind him roared, yet to him, the chaos felt like home. This was where he belonged, on the battlefield, where destruction reigned and resolve was tested. To those who had faced him, he was nothing short of a calamity. It was only then that Victor's realization hit. The black-armored figure before him was the same presence that had torn through Dygald's ranks with the Black Cavalry units. This was the unknown force, the devastating factor that had turned the tides of battle. With that understanding, Ghislain's third mana core surged to life. Power rippled through his body, flowing along a unique mana path refined through years of mastery. His eyes gleamed with lethal intent, a promise of retribution directed at the blade wielder who dared challenge Perdium's future. Ghislain moved. In the blink of an eye, or at least a blink to ordinary men, he covered the 30 paces that separated him from Victor. For martial masters like these two, time stretched, and every fraction of a moment held entire movements. The axe radiated a fierce, chilling edge as Ghislain charged, adding to its crimson hue, still stained with the blood of the foes Gillian had slain. Rising into the air with a fluid leap, Ghislain pulled back the axe, drawing on momentum greater than what Gillian had ever summoned with the same weapon. Satisfaction flickered in his expression. The regression had strengthened him. With it, he could deliver death to Perdium's enemies 2 times over. Victor responded instinctively, sword raised to meet the incoming strike. As their blades met, a thunderous explosion shattered the surrounding air. Though both used mana to shield themselves from the scorching wall of flames that hemmed them in, the raw force behind their weapons remained monstrous. Despite the impact, Victor held his ground. He understood now that he was facing Perdium's strongest protector. As the last real threat to Perdium, he knew the responsibility lay on him to end this. Yet, in the moment of collision, he also recognized that his opponent's strength matched his own. With a burst of force and the flawless application of mana reinforcement, Victor pushed back against the pressure, forcing Ghislain to flew back a few paces away. Without hesitation, both men resumed the clash. Their weapons moved in harmony, Ghislain's axe and Victor's sword, both primed for follow-up strikes. Blades collided again, ringing out in sharp clarity across the chaotic field. The duel was evenly matched, Ghislain's unpredictable, almost feral motion against Victor's composed, precise sword technique. They spun in tandem, each circling their weapons in arcs that carried significant weight and intent. Their blades met midair once more, sending another metallic crack echoing across the field. But this time, Ghislain pressed harder. Letting the axe's weight and momentum flow naturally, he infused a fresh surge of mana into it, preparing for a more devastating blow to follow. Victor did not meet the blow head-on and instead resorted to evasive maneuvers, launching himself high into the air to dodge the oncoming strike. As he descended, he raised his sword overhead, aiming to channel the force of gravity into a crushing downward attack. Calm and unwavering, Ghislain required little effort to neutralize such a move. He simply raised the handle of his axe, bracing it like a reinforced pole. The oppressive heat radiating from the surrounding flames became background noise, insignificant compared to the metallic thunder of their weapons clashing once more. Despite the power behind Victor's blow, Ghislain held firm, unfazed by the strength of his formidable opponent. With the axe handle positioned like a staff, Victor's sword locked against Ghislain's right flank. Seizing the opportunity, Ghislain leapt sideways, leaving Victor no room to retrieve his blade. Then, using precise timing and athletic finesse, Ghislain drove his knee upward to hook around Victor's neck. The maneuver caught Victor off guard. As Ghislain rotated his body midair, Victor's head trapped between his legs. The momentum carried them into a spiraling descent. This unorthodox move left Victor helpless, unable to counter the unfamiliar technique. With a resounding crash, Ghislain slammed his opponent into the ground. Victor cried out in pain as the impact reverberated through his body. There was no escaping the blow. He had been forced to absorb it entirely. Gritting his teeth, he staggered upright, landing several paces from the black-armored knight, now gripping a blood-streaked axe. His mind raced with a question. Since when had someone of such power been hidden within Perdium's forces? He tried to analyze Ghislain's unpredictable movements, realizing any lapse in concentration could mean his death. Staying composed, Ghislain finally addressed him. He asserted that he knew exactly who Victor was. He spoke of the Daigald forces and their strategies, indicating a deeper awareness that extended even to Desmond County's secret hand in the military buildup. Having already made the decision to kill Victor, Ghislain saw no reason to hold back and elaborated further. He knew that Victor was Desmond County's hidden sword, and he also acknowledging the Duchy's manipulation from the shadows. Now fully aware of the trap closing in around him, Victor's mind reeled. Could Perdium have uncovered such a classified operation? The possibility left him unsettled. Nevertheless, he tightened his grip on his sword and prepared to stand once more. Without hesitation, he charged Ghislain again, shouting out a defiant rejection of what he deemed nonsense. He believed there was no possible way Perdium had unearthed details of this top-secret mission. Their blades clashed again. As the skirmish resumed, Victor's thoughts swirled with disbelief. He was supposed to be a shadow, a covert weapon known to only a select few within Desmond County. His anonymity had been his greatest asset. Ghislain remained collected. He pulled his axe back behind him, rotated his stance, and delivered a crushing downward blow. Victor reacted swiftly, raising his sword and bracing himself for the attack. Their weapons met with another explosive burst of energy. Victor dismissed the idea that Ghislain truly knew his identity. He chalked the claim up to battlefield provocation, a psychological ploy meant to shake his focus. Refusing to waver, Victor renewed his concentration. The two continued their duel in close quarters, exchanging blows as equals. The blistering flames surrounding them became a forgotten backdrop. With sudden intensity, Victor unleashed a wide sword arc and roared that he would not be fooled by cheap tricks. At nearly the same instant, Ghislain launched himself into the air, bracing his axe like a pole to block the diagonal strike. Victor anticipated another unconventional assault. As Ghislain spun midair, he brought his axe down in a punishing arc fueled by momentum. Victor narrowly escaped the blow, stepping aside and pulling his sword back in one motion. Capitalizing on the opening, Victor brought his weapon down in a decisive swing. Yet Ghislain was resourceful as he pivoted around the axe's embedded handle, now lodged in the earth. Like a gymnast using a horizontal bar, he rotated his body and slipped just out of range. Using that rotational energy and putting mana into his leg, Ghislain unleashed a crushing kick aimed at Victor's head. The force of it sent Victor flying backward, another devastating exchange in a duel that refused to relent. The force of the kick left Victor's head ringing, the impact denting his helmet with a painful crunch. Ghislain, however, showed no signs of letting up. Using the remaining momentum, he swept the axe into position for another devastating strike. It was a direct embodiment of his brutal technique, a manifestation of controlled rage forged to bury his enemies beneath unrelenting power. Victor raised his sword just in time. The clash of steel rang out, deafening and fierce, as Ghislain's crushing power forced him down to one knee. Every fiber of Victor's being strained against the impact, and yet the pressure did not ease. Ghislain's assault continued with terrifying weight, as though the axe had a will of its own to crush and conquer. Victor's resistance collapsed, the weapon hammering downward until a burst of mana exploded outward. With a final blow, the axe struck directly atop Victor's helmet. The force was so great that the helmet tore free, blood splashing across the scorched ground. Still on one knee, Victor gasped for breath, his fingers clenched tightly around his sword. This war had already cost him dearly. Thousands of soldiers were lost to a force of only 1,000, and now in single combat, he was being overpowered by a knight whose name he didn't even know. Ahead, Ghislain walked with deliberate calm toward the sword he had thrown earlier to protect Gillian. He moved as if unbothered by the smoke and flames. The black armor he wore gleamed with menace in stark contrast to Victor's silver plating, now marred by soot and blood. With a smooth motion, Ghislain picked up his greatsword and twirled it with ease, testing the balance. Though the long-handled axe had served its purpose, the greatsword felt more natural in his grip. Crimson light reflected off its blood-stained blade, and in that moment, he was no longer a knight. He was the executioner. Even Desmond County's hidden sword failed to challenge him. Victor's breath hitched as he asked aloud the identity of the Black Knight. Ghislain knew that Victor planned to retreat with whatever forces remained. Yet no such escape would be permitted. The plan already set in motion would see the Daigald's army annihilated to the last man. So he chose to indulge Victor's question. Removing his helmet, Ghislain cast it to the scorched ground. Beneath it was the face of a young man, handsome, youthful, and unblemished. Not a single mark of fatigue clung to him, not even the scent of blood. His sharp gaze pierced through the chaos as he revealed himself to be the young lord of Perdium, the one whispered across the northern region as the scoundrel of the north.